Hello, welcome to another Ep.2 video. And today is another episode of Alternate Future of the World. The last episode we saw NATO get bigger and Arab Federation become a thing and expand, and I think that's all that happened. Russia and Ukraine went to war and Ukraine won. However, let's get into it. So the Arab Federation invades Sudan for no reason. There's really no reason. And they take the Nile, crippling Sudan's economy. And they take the coastline, even more crippling their economy. And well, they just get annexed. Now, some surrounding nations do sell land to the Federation. So there's a big Islamic state again, like during the medieval period. So yeah, but it's mostly based in Egypt and North Africa, this one, except for Arabia, which is the only slight change. However, the US goes on a bit of an expansion in the plan. So they plan to invade Mexico, Venezuela, the Philippines, Cambodia, Sri Lanka, and Fiji. And they start with the invasion of Mexico, and they go through Cuba to get closer to them, and also to get closer to Venezuela. Cuba falls very quickly due to the people actually inviting the Americans in, and so America has quick access to the Yucatan Peninsula, and they do fight in the north as well, taking Baja California, making a landing, and basically just invading the Chihuahua Desert. And yes, that's what it's called, the Chihuahua Desert. It's called the Chihuahua Desert, I think. Or is it the Mojave Desert? There's a city called Chihuahua. I don't remember. I'm pretty sure it's the Chihuahua Desert. However, yeah, they just very much just take the rest of Mexico. However, and then they sign a peace treaty with Mexico, where Mexico basically has to keep most of their land, except for the northern regions and the Yucatan Peninsula, mostly due to probably the economy. These are actually not really that economic areas. I guess resources. There's probably oil here and here. Let's just say there's oils there. There's an alternate reality. There's oils there, and that's why they want it. Very on brand for America. However, the US starts the invasion of Venezuela, and they do it very quickly because they just kidnap the president. Wait, that's happening. They just kidnapped the president. So yeah. So Venezuela joins the US, and Puerto Rico actually becomes like official state. Yeah. So yeah, the US has started to become a bit of an empire. They just have the last nations they have is Fiji, the Philippines, and Sri Lanka. However, the plans of invading Sri Lanka and Fiji are cut short because China made an alliance with them, along with Pakistan, Iran, and the Arab Federation, called the, actually I like the name, the Beijing Bloc. So they can't really invade anymore if they want to go to war with China. And with what they're doing, NATO won't help them. So they just settle for the Philippines. They make a landing on the southern island. And well, they take, I don't remember what they're called. I'm not really, no, I don't really know my islands very well. Except for Great Britain, Greenland, Australia, stuff like that. However, well, they take over the Philippines, spreading their influence over Asia, Southeast Asia. Well, China's not very happy with this. So, well, they invade Mongolia, which Russia isn't happy about, but Russia's weak at this stage because, well, one of the most important cities is Galfigish, and Moscow is very poor at the moment. So, Russia can't really do anything against China's invasion of Mongolia. Mongolia falls pretty quickly. And then they try making some more allies in the Americas. So Mexico joins. So does Haiti and Colombia and Brazil. And they do this just so they don't get invaded by the USA. And well, a bit of a Cold War starts happening between the Beijing bloc and NATO. Kind of, it's more China and their allies against America. And not their allies. Yeah, their allies don't really care what they're doing. And actually, the US is kicked out of NATO. And seeing this, the Beijing bloc starts doing talks with NATO, saying we protect each other from the USA, as the USA will do anything to stop us. So, yep, I'll stop expansion. So, NATO listens. They let Ukraine join. Oh no. SpaghettiOs. Let's get into a colour that actually makes sense. What country's green? Ireland. Why is Ireland a part of this? You know, Ireland shouldn't be a part of it. Is it Belgium? What other countries are yellow? Spain. Dark red. What countries are dark? Canada. Okay, that colour will have to do. First show us the colour of Slovakia. Nope, Slovenia. Okay. We just recolour it to be a bit of a darker blue. There. And well, so a bit of an economic alliance is made between NATO and the Beijing bloc. And well, Kazakhstan and Russia get to join it. But they don't really get any say in what happens with it. And well, the economic alliance just gets torn apart anyways, due to conflict over Hong Kong, with who should own it. Britain says they should own it, China says they should own it. However,
No, sure.
However, the US does do some things, specifically to Cambodia. They do bombing raids on their capital. So yeah, a lot of countries are saying that the US has become a war criminal. So yeah, well they get Cambodia out of it, but still, they've become a war criminal, and people hate them. People hate them so much that, well, they kick the US out of the United Nations because, well, of how much stuff they've been doing. And while another war between the US and Russia starts, and well, they thought it would go well, because it normally goes well for them, but they're not the main character. So Russia just takes over Alaska because there's no troops there. Because America was expecting an invasion from there. America's plan anyway is to well, invade them from the Philippines. But, well, they have to change that plan because Alaska's already been taken over. And you might be wondering, how did Russia get so strong? And that's because, well, they're being funded by a bunch of nations, mostly nations in the Beijing bloc and NATO, and even Australia, New Zealand and Japan. So yeah, they're not doing really well. So Russia's going to be doing really well in this war. And well, I mean, Canada lets Russia send troops through the nation, and well, Washington and Oregon and even parts of California gets annexed by them. So yeah, they're not. The US isn't doing very well. Rebellions do. Well, protests do start happening around the country. However, the US does manage to push them out of the mainland. However, in total, they don't really manage to get rid of them. Out of Alaska, so they sign a peace treaty where Russia gets Alaska and the US gets to keep all the other land, which isn't really fair, but once again, the US is still in power. So yeah, and then Russia, seeing that they did really well against America, they invade Kazakhstan. And they plan to invade Georgia, but Georgia joins NATO. So does Azerbaijan, to, well, not be involved in Russian aggression. Kazakhstan does lose a lot of land quickly, mostly in the west, though. In the north, they do gain some land, but Russia mostly just pushes them back. And they make a spearhead towards the capital, take the capital, and now, really, it's just grasslands now. So they just annex it, and they do another invasion. And they do an invasion of Uzbekistan, but they want to invade Kyrgyzstan, but they can't because they joined the Beijing bloc. You might notice like how these smaller nations are joining these powerful alliances just so they don't get invaded by Russia, and that's because Russia is seen as a threat. So yeah, Tashkent gets taken and Uzbekistan falls. Turkmenistan just willingly falls over. Afghanistan joins the Beijing bloc, and so does Tajikistan. So they don't get invaded. And then, well, Iran invades Armenia. And, well, they just take control of it. And more countries want to join the Beijing bloc, but they're not allowed to. Except for Myanmar, North Korea, Indonesia, South Africa, Oman, Saudi Arabia, Libya, and the DRC. But more countries asked to join, like India, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, even the USA asked to join, which is stupid because they're enemies with them. However, the US is eventually allowed back into NATO under one rule. They're not allowed to invade any more nations without the permission of at least 5 member states of NATO. So, and those 5, and they have to be 5 very specific nations. That's the UK, France, Germany, Turkey, and Canada. Some of the strongest nations in NATO get to control whether the US invades or doesn't invade. Yep. So the US does start off asking with if they can invade the Dominican Republic. The 4 of the 5 states say yes, because they didn't all agree. They can't have it. And the member state that didn't agree was France. Yeah, because France doesn't want the US to expand, but the others do. Kind of. Depending on the nation. And then they ask if they could join, or if they could invade Libya. And of course they said no, because there isn't there in the Beijing bloc. All of them said no, except for France. France is just trying to be a contrarian at this point, so France is kicked out of those 5 members and replaced with Ukraine. They then ask if they can invade Taiwan. And because, well, Islanders, I just need to Google something real quick. Right, because Turkey doesn't recognise Taiwan as a nation, the US is allowed to do it because, well, it would be unfair because Turkey wouldn't actually be able to have a vote in it, so they're just allowed to. And Taiwan actually willingly joins to not be invaded by China. So yeah. But for some reason they keep asking if they could invade stupid nations like Myanmar, Oman, South Africa, Brazil, all nations in the Beijing bloc. However, they do something that they actually not allowed to, and that's start up a war. Well, they start up 2 wars. One in Yemen, once again, back in Yemen, and one in the UAE. So yeah, the UAE falls quickly, and so does Yemen. And they keep the deal they take, but nobody recognises it because they weren't allowed to do it. So they're kicked out again for the 2nd time. And well, the US wants to set up their own version of the Arab Federation, so they force Qatar and Bahrain Bahrain into it. Well, into the USA. However, that will be the end of the video. Remember to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for part 3.